Hello and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I am Allysia, your host, and today we are going to talk about being an accompanist, what I consider to be one of the toughest musical gigs out there. I've talked about piano teaching on this channel before, which is something that I do professionally. I've also done accompanying in the past as well, so I wanted to talk about the things that make it so challenging and the kind of person that you need to be in order to be really good at being an accompanist. So we're going to go over 11 different things that are required to be an accompanist, and maybe in the future I'll talk about other musical jobs, especially the ones I've done before, because I can speak from a little bit of experience. For starters, accompanists are underappreciated. So if you're the kind of person who wants to be in the spotlight, you want to be appreciated for the work you do, this is probably not the gig for you. When you're accompanying a soloist, whether they're a violinist or a vocalist or whatever, it's going to be all about them. They're going to get all of the credit. And at most, you'll get like a little footnote if you're, doing a recording with them, or you'll get a thank you. You'll obviously get paid too. I guess that counts for something. So if you're the kind of person who enjoys blending into the background and you don't want to be the star, that could be, something that you would really enjoy about being an accompanist. Accompanists need to be excellent listeners. Generally, you're going to be playing for amateurs, especially if you're starting out. So in the past, I've been the accompanist for band students. Some of these students really well prepared, really well practiced, some of them not so much. And when that happens, you have to be really, really keen with your listening skills, because they might do things like skip entire parts. They might change the tempo. They might just kind of like invent notes that aren't even on the page. So you need to key into that. When you hear these changes that they make, these mistakes, you have to be able to just adapt on the fly, almost to the point of being telepathic. So not only does the accompanist need to be capable enough to hear when the soloist makes a mistake, they have to be flexible enough to adapt to it. It's all about making the soloist look good. So if they make a mistake, it's not like you can just stop and get your bearings and figure out where they are and then resume. You have to keep the continuity going. You have to keep playing and make it sound like a seamless musical experience to the best of your ability. The accompanist just needs to go with the flow, even if that means changing parts, playing something different than what's on the page, skipping a part entirely and jumping the sections. You need to be able to be flexible enough to switch things up on the fly like that. Not only do you need to learn your own part well enough that you can go with the flow and go with the mistakes if you have to, but you also have to know their part well enough that you know when they are making mistakes. You have to know when they're going to be taking breaths and pauses, or maybe more difficult parts in the piece where they might be more likely to stumble. You need to know the overall shape of the melody so you can help them create the mood that they need to create for an effective performance, things like that. It is very, very challenging to do this because, you have to learn twice the amount of music. You have to learn your own part and you have to learn their part. Whether you're doing one-off accompanist gigs or you're, say, accompanying an entire school band, like individual solo performances, you're going to need to learn a ton of music. And this is, again, one of the challenges of being an accompanist. So say if you're learning music for a school band, each of the kids might pick a completely different piece based on their own tastes and preferences, and these pieces might not be easy to play. So you have to be able to learn a diverse amount of pieces quickly. And you might have a situation, and this has happened to me, where a couple weeks before a performance, some of the kids are like, actually, I'm changing my piece because my teacher told me that I wasn't doing a good enough job and I have to switch to this other piece. And then you have to switch to that other piece too. And again, you have to learn these well enough to be able to play them, but you also need to learn these well enough that you know their parts so you can adapt to any mistakes they might be making. Which brings me to my next point. An accompanist must be an excellent sight reader, because you're going to be learning so much music. If you're a bad sight reader, you're going to have to spend a lot of extra time learning all of this music, and it's just not going to be like a very practical, if you're spending hours and hours and hours to learn every piece, it's just not going to work out. You have to be able to basically read music on the fly. And that'll happen to you in some accompanist scenarios. Music will be just like put in front of you. You might have not even looked at it before playing it. Sometimes you really do need to just be able to sight read on the fly. If you're a really good professional accompanist, you'll have an opportunity to play with professional musicians who are very, very skilled, and you're not going to have to deal with some of these things that we've been talking about, like dealing with big mistakes and tempo fluctuations and stuff like that. But if you're just starting out or you're establishing yourself as an accompanist, you're going to have to play with amateurs and student musicians, and these are the people who are more likely to make mistakes that you're going to have to adapt to. You're also going to have to play a bit more of a leadership role if you're playing with amateurs. If an amateur makes a mistake, they might not have the confidence to just kind of like move forward with it. They're going to be looking to you to keep momentum going or to give them that lead in that they're listening for, things like that. So you have to be comfortable taking the lead. But on the other hand, if you're playing with professionals, it's going to be kind of the opposite. You're much more likely to be led by them because these are the performers who are just they're so competent and so confident that they're just gonna take you with them, and you have to be able to keep up. Accompanists must be willing to work unusual hours. This is not the gig for you if you want something that's a 9-to-5 situation, because most performances are going to happen in evenings or weekends. Like whether it's you're playing at church for the congregation, whether you're playing recitals, performances, that's usually when they're going to be happening. And as someone who's been working outside of the 9-to-5 for basically my entire adult life, I like it, I'm used to it, but it's not for everyone. You have to be pretty comfortable being on the exact opposite schedule of most humans, and it's a lot more of a challenge to find time to hang out with friends and family because of it. You must be willing to have short rehearsals or no rehearsals. If you're really, really, really lucky, you'll have ample time to practice with the soloist, but in the real world that seldom happens. When I accompanied band kids, we had 10 minutes per student, it's barely enough time for them to figure things out, let alone you. And sometimes you don't even get a rehearsal at all. I mentioned this briefly already, but if you're playing with amateurs, be prepared to take a leadership role. If they make a mistake, they're going to be it's pretty likely that they're going to shrink back a little and wait for a cue from you. So you have to be able to have a keen ear, hear those mistakes, and be able to lead them forward. So they're going to be looking to you for things like tempo cues, or if there's a ritardando and you're slowing down and there's a pause, they'll look to you to kind of keep things going, when to start things back up again, and things like that. So you have to be willing to make all those cues very plain and apparent as a leader. A unique situation is if you're playing the piano for a church congregation, they're going to be looking for you to really set the tempo, but it's weird because the way sound travels, it's almost going to feel like they're half a beat behind you the whole time. And you have to be able to know that to their ears, it sounds like everything's on time, but by the time their voices travel back to you, it sounds like everything's delayed. But you have to be confident enough to keep going despite the fact that you're hearing this delay. So things like that, you're going to have to be really confident with your leadership. And finally, the accompanist must be willing to simplify things. Not all the time, but depending on what you have to learn. A lot of the pieces that you have to learn as an accompanist are incredibly challenging. And depending on the performance situation, it might be in your best interest to make it easier to play, especially if you don't have a lot of time to learn it. And this could be anything from, like, I don't know, maybe there's like crazy octaves jumping around in the left hand that you can simplify to single notes. Things that you can simplify and change without harming the integrity of the piece as a whole is generally something that accompanists are going to do if they're under a lot of time pressure, if they want to make life easier for themselves. And a good accompanist will be able to simplify things in a way that the audience would just never notice. And that is all for today's video. Those are the main challenges and hurdles of being an accompanist. And these are all things that I've dealt with personally, so I can speak firsthand about how challenging it is. And all of these reasons are basically why it is one of my least favorite musical gigs, but for some people, they really thrive on the, improvisational aspect of it and the kind of excitement of always having to learn new music and stuff like that. So I can see the appeal. It's not for me, might be for you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out us on social media and Patreon if you would like, and I will catch you in the next one. My cat's she makes her own fun.